Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. The AFN Special Chiefs Assembly wrapped up today, and the day's events included a speech by Justin Trudeau. The AFN had to once again hold the assembly virtually due to COVID-19 concerns, and this caused technical glitches. Some chiefs complained of being unable to access policy discussions and debate via Zoom. Others said overall participation was too low to move ahead on resolutions. However, resolutions on healthcare, education, and the creation of a National Treaty Commissioner's Office were discussed, and a 2S LGBTQ Council was established.
We know that continuing to move forward on the path of reconciliation cannot come without truth. That's why we're appointing a special interlocutor to further advance justice on residential schools while ensuring that communities undertaking burial searches have what they need. The children who never returned home must not be forgotten. As a country, we must all continue hearing the truth of what happened to them and to their communities.
The man behind the Eagle Feather News, which for 24 years has been providing Indigenous news to Saskatchewan, will be stepping down from his role as publisher. Now, a new generation of journalists will be running the paper in the new year. APTN's Leanne Sanders sat down with John Lajemodier and has his story.
Eagle Feather publisher Jean Lajemodier is ending what he calls an unintended journey. Just months before Eagle Feather's 25th anniversary, Lajemodier has announced his intention to leave the helm. He says Eagle Feather has evolved over the years, but lifting up the community through storytelling remains the same.
Our community needs this kind of journalism and storytelling. And it's because we've been telling it as Indigenous people from an Indigenous standpoint. And even when we have non-Indigenous freelancers, we tell them this is how you got to write it. This is what we want. And so these non-Indigenous freelancers are all of a sudden learning to write better on Indigenous perspectives.
Lajemodier says one of the things he's most proud of is fostering new journalists from First Nations University's Indigenous Communications Arts program. New managing editor Carrie Benjo says she's excited to put her stamp on the paper and in expanding to digital.
I want to be a major contributor to the content, and I'm really looking forward to revitalizing and revamping Eagle Feather. It's good the way it is, but there's always room for improvement, and I'm really looking forward to exploring new mediums in storytelling.
Benjo and the rest of the team take over in the new year. Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
A lot can be learned through traditional names. Some families in the Northwest Territories want to reclaim their Indigenous names, but they face a bureaucratic challenge. But as our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs learns, it's worth the fight every step of the way.
Okay, now you can go over it with the blue.
For Shanae Guttele-Velpi and her daughters Sahai-An and Na-El, there's pride in having traditional Venezuelan names. But there's also challenges in getting bureaucrats to recognize proper spelling of names with traditional accents and symbols.
Every time that I have to write out their name on a legal document, it doesn't feel right, and having to explain to my daughters that this is how I have to write it on these papers because they question why I'm writing why am I writing it wrong?
Guttele-Velpi is a Yellowknife resident and member of the Litsukay Dene First Nation.
Lift your feet, Sahaya.
APTN first covered her story in 2016, but she's still fighting.
But if it's an official language here, why is it so hard?
Indigenous individuals can now apply to reclaim their names as written on passports and other identity documents.
Despite federal legislation from June 2021, the Northwest Territories government still hasn't changed their policy, which only recognizes the Roman alphabet.
With that, you still cannot use the proper spelling. It says everywhere of how important it is to reclaim the language. And this is a step into doing it through our birth certificates.
In 2019, Guttele-Velpi's letter asking for diacritics in Indigenous names to be recognized was tabled in the legislature, but no further action was taken. APTN News reached out to the Languages Commissioner of the NWT, but they were unable to respond by airtime. Reclaiming Indigenous names runs in the family. In Little, Shanae's uncle, J.C. Catholic, is in the process of legally changing his name back. Missionaries who came to the area had projected a colonized version of the family name.
To them, Gatala sounds like Catholic.
JC says identity is tied to all Indigenous names.
A lot of people say, you come from this tribe, that kind of thing. It's okay, right? You can say, yeah, I'm part of, like the Socialist Nation, right? Chippewa Nation. I'm part of that. And they say, okay, which family you come from.
Do you like to teach people how to say your name properly?
And do you like your name?
Yeah.
Why do you like your name?
Because my name's different, no one else has it.
Sahai Ah's name means when the sun peeks through, while Na'el, her name, is a word to describe caribou crossing a river. For Shanae, traditional names tie an individual to their culture and their teachings.
Having her carry that name means the word's not lost. And we don't use that word anymore because of the declining numbers in caribou. And we don't see caribou crossing rivers anymore, but this little girl carries it around like a badge.
I'll try to write your name.
Charlotte Mort Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Today is the 59th day in a row where Iqaluit residents haven't been able to drink their water due to a fuel leak. Our reporter Kent Driscoll joins us from the capital of Nunavut. Kent, I understand you've learned something new about the source of the contamination. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Thanks, Daryl. And yes, we have learned something new about the source of the contamination. Mostly the fuel tank that's most likely responsible for leaking the fuel into our water supply. The city discovered the fuel tank buried next to an underground water storage area. Now, I was talking with our mayor yesterday, Kenny Bell, and one of the questions I asked him at the end was how frustrated he was. And he began to describe this fuel tank and how they found it. You've got to check this out. Here's the mayor.
1995 was when they think that the tank was buried. Why? Right? The tank is 500 gallons. 4 guys could empty, and move that empty tank no problem by hand. It doesn't make any sense that happened. It was buried. It was cemented over. There was a staircase. There was 3 feet of earth put over it to be never found again. How does that make any sense? So of course the frustration. You're sitting there like, this is one of the dumbest things ever. Why would you even think to do that?
Okay, Kent, so dare we ask, is there any possible end to this crisis?
Well, there are hints, but nothing definitive yet. The armed forces have their water purification plant back up and running, and they've extended their mission to December 23rd. Now, they've extended their mission a couple of times, so they think they could be here at least until around Christmas time. Now, the current holdup is between the city of Iqaluit and the government of Nunavut. The government has a long list of items with the water system they want Iqaluit to address before removing the do not consume order. Now, the city says they can hold off on a few of those items because they're not necessary to get the water flowing in a healthy manner. They're more long-term. So they're negotiating what needs to be done. And then you got to throw in the difficulties of remoteness. The experts to analyze the system have to be flown in from the south. The health inspector is from a different community in Nunavut. Even when it comes down to exchanging information online, you can't send a lot of technical information online from Nunavut because our internet speed is so drastically slow.
Okay, Kent, so what's the real-life effect for residents? How are you all holding up?
The cracks are beginning to show. I mean, take recreation. We had to close down the pool and the gym because the recreation staff had to be retasked with the job of distributing water. Now, between the armed forces and the government of Nunavut flying in all this water and producing water here, we have enough water and we're going to continue. But the questions are, how long can the Army stay for? How long will the government of Nunavut continue to be willing to charter planes full of bottled water at great expense? And of course, when can we use the pool again?
Now, Kent, there is one positive thing to report. What's going on with the recycling over there?
Well, just a little bit of backstory here for you, Daryl, because to understand why it's so important to keep plastic out of our landfill, you need to know the story of that landfill. Our dump is horrible. It's a temporary mess in a bad location that has been due for replacement for years, and the replacement keeps getting delayed. And it's been known to catch on fire from time to time and burn uncontrollably for days. Now, the way I usually describe the dump is, it was a phrase I picked up from one of the oil rig firefighters that they brought to put out the dump last time it caught on fire. And what he said is, you guys don't have a landfill, you have a dump. Now, the Arctic co-ops have teamed up with one of the shipping companies, and they had been collecting plastic bottles to ship down south for recycling to keep them out of that disastrous dump. They had managed to fill 5 sea lift containers and were out of space. But between them and the government of Nunavut, they managed to get a few more sea lift containers. So a very important piece of the puzzle, keeping the plastic out of the landfill, seems to be under control for now.
All right, Kent, thanks so much for this update. Always appreciated.
Koyanamik, anytime.
We want to hear what you think about the water situation in Iqaluit. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca or leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. All right, we need to take a short break, but still to come, the Mi'kmaq are hoping to be recognized in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Details next. Welcome back. The Mi'kmaq are known for creating the flat blade hockey stick and their contribution to the game of hockey. Although it's disputed where hockey was invented, the Mi'kmaq are hoping to be recognized in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Hockey has a special connection to Mi'kma'ki. The flat blade hockey stick was developed by the Mi'kmaq. Europeans witnessed them playing hockey in the late 1700s on the frozen lakes of Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. The Mi'kmaq became master carvers of the hockey stick, and by the early 1900s, the sticks were shipped all over the world. Hockey researcher Mark Grant says the Mi'kmaq deserve to be recognized by the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto.
In the next generation to come, I hope that people will say, "Oh, you're from the Mi'kmaq First Nation. Way to go, buddy." That's really cool because, you know, I've learned your story in ice hockey, and way to go.
Grant submitted a bid to nominate the Mi'kmaq Nation for their contribution to the birth and early evolution of ice hockey. That is overdue, according to Cheryl Maloney of Sabaganagati First Nation.
It was unfolding that we were more than just crafters of a hockey stick, that we inspired this game, and it's evolved with Canadians and the Mi'kmaq people.
Maloney and her sister created a documentary on the Mi'kmaq roots of hockey. Her grandfather and elder, Joe Cope, wrote in 1943, "The honor and credit wholly belongs to the Mi'kmaq Indians of this country. Long before the Paleface strayed to this country, the Mi'kmaqs were playing 2 ball games, a field and ice game." Maloney says the recognition is for future generations, so Indigenous children know that hockey is their game.
We invented this game. This is our game. You deserve to be here. You belong here. And I think for Indigenous children, that's something that we always don't know. Our kids are made to feel like we don't belong.
The nomination deadline is March 15th. Hockey Hall of Fame plans to announce the inductees June 2022. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabuktuk, also known as Halifax.
And now the story of a day school survivor who makes traditional Mi'kmaq baskets and shares the traditions with others to keep her culture alive. Angel Moore brings us her story.
Sandra Racine of Iqaluit First Nation spends about 12 hours a day in her studio in southern Nova Scotia. She uses harvested black ash and sweetgrass to make baskets, strawberries, corn, and flowers, and fancy baskets designed to look like the ones traded with early Europeans.
So the ladies wanted to impress the Europeans and surprise them, like, okay, we want to do a trade. Here's a basket. How much would you give me for this basket?
Racine attended the Big Cove Federal School for 10 years, a day school located in her community where speaking Mi'kmaq was not allowed.
That's why I speak out and protect the culture itself a lot. I feel like it belongs to us, and we have to keep teaching our children.
Before COVID struck, Racine held workshops for youth and other survivors.
It felt good because we were all speaking in Mi'kmaq. We all connected with everything, like the culture, the basket making.
Racine is known for her strawberry baskets, which sell for about $700. Items such as this corn basket are commissioned and can take longer to make and can sell for up to $1,500.
These are fancy baskets, and I love making fancy baskets. I like creating them. I dye them. I do flowers. I do all kinds of wacky stuff with ash.
Racine plans on moving back to New Brunswick to be close to her family in Iqaluit and pass on her knowledge to youth in her community. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Iqaluit, also known as Halifax.
Another one of our spiritual leaders has left this world for the next. Dave Kershane Jr., known as Nigani Aki Inene, leading Earthman, passed on early this week at his home on the Saugeen Anishinaabe Nation north of Winnipeg. He was the son of Dave Kershane Sr., an architect of the modern-day First Nation leadership movement in Canada and the first president of the Manitoba Indian Brotherhood, the predecessor of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. Dave Kershane Jr. dedicated his life to the spiritual development of all people. He was fluent in the Anishinaabe-Moan language and keeper and teacher of many of his people's songs and ceremonies. He was the driving force behind the Turtle Lodge on the south shore of the Winnipeg River at Saugeen. We need to take a short break, but first, it's been a busy week on the political front in Ottawa, and a jam-packed episode of Nation to Nation is coming up next. Here's Brett Forrester with a preview.
Thanks, Winnipeg. In a few minutes, I'm joined by former National Chief candidates Russ Diabo and Jody Calahoo Stonehouse for a discussion about the AFN's future as this year's Winter Assembly concludes. Meanwhile, First Nations without clean water are close to settling a national class action. An $8 billion deal with the feds could be approved early as next week. Lead plaintiff Chief Emily Wheatung explains what that could mean for her community. Later, Senator Kim Pate discusses why some senators feel the Liberals' latest effort to address systemic racism in the justice system falls short. That's all on Nation to Nation.
Welcome back. Let's go ahead and take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting in the east, -3 in snow in Charlottetown and -1 in Fredericton. -12 in Nain and -13 in sun on Happy Valley Goose Bay. -2 in Val-d'Or and 0 in Montreal. +1 in North Bay and +7 in Toronto. -7 in Big Trout Lake and -1 in Thunder Bay. Snow and -15 in Churchill and snow and -8 in Norway House. -5 in snow in Barons River and -7 in sun in Dauphin. -9 in North Battleford and -5 in Regina. -14 in snow in Stony Rapids and -3 in snow in Buffalo Narrows. In the west, snow and -14 in Fort Chippewa and -4 in Grand Prairie. -1 in Edmonton and -2 in Lethbridge. -4 in Quesnel and +5 in Vancouver. Snow and -14 in Dease Lake and -3 in Prince George. -21 in Old Crow and snow and -21 in Whitehorse. -17 in Norman Wells and -17 in Trout Lake. -20 in Inuvik and -17 in Colville Lake. Snow and -23 in Cambridge Bay and -11 in Chesterfield. Snow and -23 in Resolute and -23 in Iqaluit. An Anishinaabe family from Manitoba traveled to Toronto to compete on the Canadian game show Family Feud last month. The Lynx Lake Cousins from Tutanawase First Nation in Manitoba battled it out on the big screen for prizes. The episode aired on November the 8th, and the cousins sported different colored ribbon skirts to represent different Indigenous causes, like red for MMIWG, black for Land Back, and orange for Every Child Matters. While the family did not score any points, they say overall the experience was a win. Josh Linksleg explains.
We all decided that we would wear different colors that were associated with different causes or organizations or tribulations that were happening within our community. I was wearing orange for Every Child Matters. Cheryl was wearing maroon for We Matter. Whitney was wearing blue for Clean Water. Betty was wearing red for MMIWG, and Harmony was wearing black for Land Back. So we went on there so we could show the entire nation that those are the things that, are really hurting our culture at this moment.
In Alberta, members of the Siksika Nation will soon be able to hit the ice in their home community, thanks to Calgary's WHL and NHL hockey foundations. It isn't ready yet, but soon this outdoor rink in Siksika will be opened to the community of about 4,000 people. It was built in partnership with the Nation, the Calgary Flames, and the Calgary Hitmen. In the off-season, the rink will be used as a basketball court. Chief Ure Crowfoot says facilities like this break down barriers that Indigenous youth face.
But one of the things that we're trying to do with these partnerships is to overcome those barriers, because an outdoor rink is a lot more than an outdoor rink. A basketball court is a lot more than a basketball court. It builds character, it builds leadership, it builds qualities that instill value in each individual.
A Tetlik woman has won the 2021 Canadian River Heritage Award for her work in river preservation and protection of the Peel Watershed. Bobby Rose Cooey is the winner of the prestigious award, which honors a person who has significantly contributed to river heritage in Canada. Cooey was recognized for her efforts in the protection of the Peel Watershed, a large area of pristine wilderness in northern Yukon, as well as her work as an advocate for youth engagement in river conservation and connection. Cooey, who is originally from Fort McPherson in the Northwest Territories, says it's important to her to protect the waters.
Our life revolves around water, like our bodies are water. The way we travel is most part of the time is on water.
All right, that's all we have for you tonight on APTN National News. Make sure to stick around. Nation to Nation with Brett Forster starts right now. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you for joining us and have a great night.